Welcome to The Call to Rise, the podcast for sacred rebels, visionaries, and conscious changemakers. Here we sit down with the people birthing the new earth, weaving ancient wisdom with modern strategy to build movements that heal, transform, and uplift our world. I'm Makenzie Darling, your host, inviting you into honest conversations, practical tools, and hard-won wisdom to awaken your power and to inspire you to answer the call to rise and to meet this moment in history. Welcome, everyone. Today we have a really special guest, Misha. Welcome to the show. Really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Makenzie. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we connected just about a month or so ago, and I was really taken aback by your work that you do with SoulPlay, and I have always been interested in attending that festival. Unfortunately, I haven't yet, so that's on the bucket list, and maybe conversing with you today, I'll be able to, make that jump and actually purchase the ticket and see you at the next festival, because it just sounds like an amazing opportunity.
It is. Many people say it's their favorite festival of a big community that goes to festivals. So I do highly recommend it. It is I think what's most special is just the feeling of heart connected sweetness. It's very sweet and also very expansive and a little pushing edges in ways and introducing people to things that are outside of the normal realm. So if you're starting to dip your toe into new realms of alternative healing, alternative understanding of yourself, belief systems, and wanting to break out of old paradigms, SoulPlay is a very good place to both start and to dive deeper into.
Well, for movement makers, I think that's where we are at, right? We're bringing movement makers in who want to shift paradigms and who want to really birth a new earth and to challenge the status quo. So I'm excited to be in this conversation with you. I want to read your bio really quick because I think there's a couple different ventures that you are involved with that push the edges and have people re-examine their relationships to themselves and to the world around them. So for the people that are listening, Misha Bonaventura is the producer of SoulPlay, a festival where she creates transformative experiences that expand participants' capacity for authentic self-expression and personal growth through meaningful connection and play. Her work focuses on guiding individuals to uncover new depths, embrace their truth, and step boldly into their fullness. With nearly a decade of experience in community building and relationship coaching, Misha co-produced Bonobo Network from 2017 to 2024, supporting sex-positive communities and helping individuals worldwide create more pleasure and authentic connection in their lives. She developed innovative policies across accountability and consent, applying harm reduction and transformative justice principles to community practices. Well, I really applaud you for the work that you've been doing. And a main reason, why I brought you on the show is when you're building a movement, community building is obviously baked into that. And I think you have a lot to offer my listeners on how do you create culture, first of all. Maybe we'll start there. And then I'd love a little bit later to dive deeper into consent and safety and harm reduction and the best practices that you've found. So why don't we start there? And you can talk about both of your organizations around how do you build that culture?
Yeah. So I think I'll start with kind of my story of where I began, and that will help set the stage for how the culture building is one of the most important pieces to stay on the same page, especially societally. And that's what culture building is creating a social baseline of how we're interacting with each other. And I started looking at started questioning, I guess, my path in life when I started dating someone who had broken his back on a motorcycle accident sneaking out to Burning Man. And he, on his medical bed when he was not supposed to ever walk again, read Moby Dick and got obsessed with giant squid. And so the entire time I was with him, he was thinking about and shifting his life from being a computer programmer, website programmer, or something like that, to a giant squid expert. And it was a really transformative experience for me. And that had me start wondering, like, what was it that I would do if I could do anything? And it led me on all kinds of paths. It helped me see my neurodivergence was putting me in a box of thinking that I wasn't as smart as other people, and that had like made my world much smaller than what I had really wanted it to, like what was my dreams. My dreams were quite squelch, actually, because of the belief systems I had around my neurodivergence. And so I started thinking and exploring, and I started getting, like, one of my biggest interests and explorations was in my own relating and romantic relationship, because that relationship with the giant squid expert blew up. And I was like, oh, I really want to undo my paradigm of like relating. And I could see how I had really, like, I was devastated when that relationship fell apart. And I really wanted to like heal something pretty deep in there. And so I started exploring open relationships, which is a movement that is definitely starting to take hold, and people are really shifting outside of the box of a nuclear family of like two spouses. I mean, we're even beyond the, at least in the Bay Area, beyond the heteronormative space, but two people that raise a family and, have a house and a car and blah, blah, blah. And like, it's actually true that many of us actually have very expansive families, and also chosen families, and also just creative families, because many people have been getting divorced over the last couple decades, and that has required blended families, all kinds of things. And so the movement and the shift in how we see connection and families is really a big shift. And what I focused on first was sexual relationships. And so I was really piecing apart how we think about sexual relationships and the assumptions that we all have based on the mononormativity of our society. And once you step into the open relationship world, there can be no more assumptions. And so like there's so much to question, so much to think about, so many different configurations of creating. And then now I'm shifting away from that focus of sexual relationships and moving more towards familial relationships and heart-centered. How do we actually support each other? How do we create support? How do we make it so that families, people that don't have kids but maybe want kids in their lives, be able to support families that have kids that are overtaxed because it's really hard to raise children? And like, how do we get those people together? That's what I'm doing with SoulPlay and with Bonobo. What I was really like focused on was how do we date better? How do we meet each other better? How do we relate in better ways, rather than what feels like the overly enmeshed or overly, kind of like the dynamic of avoidant or avoidant to like the insecure attachment styles, basically. I'll pause there. I felt like I had talked a lot.
I want to pause for a quick moment. If what we're talking about today resonates with you, you'll want to check out the Movement Maker Incubator, my 6-month intensive where I guide sacred rebels and change makers to birth their own movements using ancient wisdom and modern strategy. You can join the waitlist and learn more about this sacred rite of passage for change makers at globalmovementmaker.com/incubator. No, I'm loving everything you're saying, and I can feel it so deeply, because that belonging piece is just so important. And I can really resonate with the like ideology of this nuclear family that can feel really isolating. I mean, growing up, I had a difficult family that I never really felt like I belonged into from a young, like very young age, I could relate strongly to the ugly duckling story. And so coming to the Bay Area, and while I'm not in the sex positive movement, I have been in the psychedelic renaissance and being in my movement maker, co-creative families. And it really has had me examine what is belonging. And also, I mean, going to work with different indigenous tribes all over the world and understanding tribalism and intergenerational support and the whole community coming together to help hold one another. I think that that's something that in Francis Weller's book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, have you ever read it?
No, it sounds
Oh, it's an
beautiful.
amazing book. It's all about grief, and he walks you through the five gates of grief. And one of the gates of grief is missing something that you intrinsically knew that was yours. And that is the part of the tribe, right? You're born feeling like you truly belong, but then you're segmented into this really small container. And yet I think so many of us are yearning for that belonging that we it's intrinsically ours, but we don't realize it.
Yeah. Yeah. Belonging. I've been really diving deep inside of the idea of belonging and how much of an internal experience it is. And then how do you create the possibilities for belonging as as an experience creator, as the social architect, but you can make lots of opportunities, but it doesn't mean that people will actually feel belonging, partly because belonging is an internal experience, and much of it is. And so, really working on your own, I mean, belonging is such a deep wound for all of us, too. And so, yeah, and it's just how to create spaces of welcoming opportunities for connection, invitation, but yeah, can't promise belonging. So, it's been interesting.
I love so much that you're bringing up that it's an internal belonging within my movement maker incubator program where I'm teaching movement makers how to build movements. I have a module on community development, and half of the module is what is your relationship to belonging, right? Like what's your relationship to conflict management? What's your relationship to people pleasing? And actually, even more important, what are the ancestral stories that have been passed down that are about belonging? Right? Because those stories are coded into your DNA and you're not realizing that they're being passed down.
Yeah. And then that also gets into power dynamics around leadership, especially in what you're doing with supporting leaders. They have their own belonging things. So as I've grown as a leader, it's like, oh, I still feel like an awkward 16-year-old that isn't liked by anybody, even though I'm the central figure in this like big thing. I still don't feel like I belong. And that wound is like, it's tricky and weird.
So tricky.
And I think one of the big things, if we're speaking to leaders, is like if you're not owning your own power, whether it's subconscious because the little one in you still feels like you don't belong and you don't run a thing, like that, but you do run a thing, you're actually, and people perceive you as having power, that's going to get very dangerous very quickly because you need to be able to own the power that you have, wield it correctly, and fairly, and make sure that you're taking the high road, that there are ways in which like power can be manipulated, and it can get very tricky when one is triggered.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly feel you on that. And you come from the sex positive movement. I've been really deeply steeped in the psychedelic movement, and I think both of those are such amplifiers because they have so much at stake. Right around safety and power. And, when I was going through my entheogenic minister training, I was told about the importance of up power and down power, and that power is so tricky because when you are sitting in that ministerial seat and someone is trusting you while they're under medicine, you better believe that you have an up power position and you have to be really cognizant of that, right? And then when that opportunity is done, you can take off the power scarf and put that to the side and you're, back to being regular human in regular world. But I think you're touching upon something that's really important. How do you stay in right relationship where you're not overpowering and then you're not underpowering?
So my favorite book on this is called Befriending the Enemy by Adam Kahan. He is a international mediator. He lives in South Africa. And I am trying to look up a quote right now. Love and power. So this is my favorite quote from Martin Luther King Jr., and it speaks directly to what you just asked. Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love.
Wow.
So that quote, that quote hit me like a ton of bricks when it's in the book, the Befriending the Enemy. The entire book to me feels like it's wrapped around this quote. And it really shows the balance between power and love. And that if you are in the power position and somebody is telling you you're misusing your power, you need to be loving and humble. And if you have loved too much, or then what I mean by that is overgiven, or over, like you're maxed out, you have like you're beyond your capacity around the giving that you have offered, then you need to like balance that with some power. That means boundaries, that means resourcing yourself, that means you need the love. Basically, you need support and connection and love. So balancing, like thinking about, when I feel powerless, I need more love. When I have a lot of love, or when I feel like I love this thing so much and you're ruining it, that's me disempowering myself and realizing that like I need to find where my power is in those stories if I'm in victim mode. So that it's a complicated concept, but it's the thing that I fundamentally go back to over and over again.
When you read it, I had the same reaction. Like my whole body just was goosebumps, and it just read as complete truth. And of course, leave it to Martin Luther King to say that so poignantly. So thank you for sharing that. That was incredible. I've never heard that before. What you're speaking to, I think under the hood of Movement Maker is I'm really wanting to fan the flames of the people that have too much love to give and actually have that hard time stepping into power. I'll just share a little bit of my own story. Like for the last decade, I've been the movement maker behind the movement maker. So I've been pretty much the chief of staff for every single movement, like doing everything behind the scenes, burning myself out beyond. And then, the person steps up, takes all the credit, and barely says thank you. And it has taken everything in my soul to step out and be the front facing person of Movement Maker. And, I've had to do a lot of deep excavation, a lot of deep work, really learning boundaries, just as you said. Also, I think Marianne Williamson's quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but, basically saying it's not our darkness that scares us, it's our light that scares us the most. And I think for empaths, and I think for those people that do have so much love, I think that is a common threat. And so how do we call those people out to step into more vulnerability, more power, and more ownership of their power?
I feel a lot of resonance with your story. I also have been a secondhand person to amazing humans that have been able to do a lot in this world. And I really wanted to be the person. I didn't want to be the second to the amazing person. I'm like, I am an amazing person. And so, a lot of my work has been around that. And part of the work is part of my work in that was really asking for what I wanted, being clear about what I wanted, saying, no, I don't want to be your assistant. Actually, I want to be your co-producer, or like I actually want to be your peer, or I am your peer, and like I have this to offer, and I want to be, and I'm growing in certain ways. So in Bonobo Network, one of the like, let's see, lessons I've learned. So like William Winters was my producer and founder of Bonobo Network, and I came in about 7 years after he started that project, and we made it a business together. And it's one of the probably, I would say, most successful sex positive community based organizations, definitely in the Bay Area, possibly in the world. We are known for, like, it is very difficult to cultivate a community that is having lots of romantic relationships with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Not just, and the reason why I think certain places don't focus on relationships, especially in the sex positive realm, like, more of the swinger community is a little more anonymous, a little more like we're partners and we're going to like partner swap than what I would say Bonobo is, which is more of a like friends that like to have sexy relationships with each other. And these friends are like actually like do a lot with each other. And there's like little mini groups that kind of get formed. But so that's what we mean when we say like this is a community-based sex positive like membership space. William is a philosopher. He has a degree in philosophy. He is an orator. He was on the debate team. Like he knows how to speak, and it came to him very easily. I being neurodivergent, he's also neurodivergent, but I being part of my neurodivergence was that I would lose words when I was speaking. And it's something that I've had to learn and get over and like trust myself, trust if I can't find a word, there's a different word, just pick the different word, don't get stuck, things like that. And so, one thing I love to say when I'm up on stage is, hey, I am, a person who is neurodivergent, and it actually is really hard, has been a long journey for me to get up here on stage. And I want other people who are neurodivergent or who have a story that they're not as smart as other people, or yeah, like whatever that story is, it is absolutely not true. There are tools out there that can support you. Once I learned how my brain worked, and I stopped using the coping mechanisms that were actually working against my brain, things started to flow. And I will never be a great orator. But I have come a very long ways. And so, yeah, I just want to encourage people to like ask the question, like, how can I get the help? There is so much out there that we know about around dyslexia, ADD, autism, like there's the full spectrum of all the things. And it's just it's our brains. So like they all work very differently. And so you really need to kind of like find the way that your brain needs like little tweakings. That's a funny word. Tweaks. But where was I going? What was I saying before this? Before I went on that tangent.
Well, you're basically saying for people to step into their power.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was able to be held by my business partner. I picked somebody who had complementary skill sets than I did, and he picked me because of that as well. And so I'm more of an organized person. He's more of like the messy, but orator, writer. He's a writer. He's like, and I'm not as great of a writer, but like we really helped our ideas like mesh, and that's how we brought forth the consent and accountability policy that Bonobo is very known for. And that was so interesting because we ended up releasing that for free to anybody who needed it so that they could use it as a template, because it was one of the first policies that did not just kick people out, but had an accountability space where there was a way to show your work if you did the work, and then you could come back in. And so many event organizers just like there's a consent violation or even just a small bump in the road, depending on it, there's like different layers and levels of consent violations. And in the sex positive world, that's like one of the biggest things that might happen. And so we were able to like create a policy that wasn't just like you do something and you're out. And instead of going into a shame spiral, the hope is that the person who gets the feedback will take the feedback, take it somewhere to learn about their, what happened, and we would give them those resources and then not do it anymore. Instead of what often happens is they get kicked out of one, event, and then they go to a different one, and then they get kicked out there, and then they go to a different one, or they go from one town to another, and they just, there's no going away. Like you actually need, like we wanted to invest in people if they were willing to do the work. It's a little harder with people who have been harmed because we were not, we're not therapists, we were event organizers, and we weren't, we could pressure people who did not follow the rules or who did not understand how to like do consent well, to get educated. But for people who were harmed, there was a complicated question around how to like help them get the help that they needed, because you can't, we're not going to pressure people to get help, get the counseling that they needed. But when like what happens now with like cancel culture or with people who are victims or like who are harmed and want reparations, the idea is that, oh, that person needs to be held accountable and then I will be whole. And we have to decouple those concepts. Everyone needs to do their own work in parallel, and we cannot have an expectation that one piece of work will support the other. It may at some point, but you cannot hinge your healing on someone else's healing. And it has been some of the biggest heartbreak that I've seen in a long time is like that twist in how people have thought about accountability in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much that I could chew off of what you just said. It's so rich. First, that like cancel culture that we're in, and I really love how you're calling people in, you're not calling people out. And I think if we could just have a movement around that, I mean, it would be such a different way of life right now, right? And then, I saw exactly what you were talking about. I worked for a fairly well-known psychedelic training school that had a big sexual abuse scandal. And that's what happened, is that they were having the founders go through this process of trying to call them in and trying to repair what had been wrong and seeing if they would sit at the table and be held with their peers on what steps were to move forward. And then we had the people that were harmed and the community that were like fighting for justice, and we're like, no, this person's like burnt at the stake regardless, and no one could hear the other, and we were just like mute points. And something that I'd love for you to talk about too is the hours of unspent labor that then you are, in the middle of these two feuds and trying to hold all of that and just getting burnt out yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that? And how do you put boundaries in place for that not to happen? Please tell us your ways.
Yeah, so the biggest thing I feel is important is the upfront agreements or contract that you have with your community. And even when you say, like, in Bonobo, one of our biggest things, and SoulPlay too, is like, okay, well, we are a community of accountability, and all we expect is that people rise up to like when something happens, like how do you handle it? It's not that something is never going to happen. We cannot never expect that. We have to expect that things are going to go wrong, or that things like people are going to be in conflict in some way. And it's how you handle it is the important part. And then give people tools. So a lot of pre-fronting education, basically. But always what's hard is the legacy of our punishment system, of our punitive system, is what it is. And even when people philosophically might be very aligned with restorative justice or calling in or, they don't realize how long it takes and how much investment it takes to get people to understand shifts and changes. And then on top of it, when you have people in power, like it gets very fuzzy at the top, right? Like there is always a lot of critique happening to the leadership of a community. And then I have found as a leader, it gets harder and harder to distinguish what is critique that I need to be really listening to and what is critique that just is noise that like this is my organization. I get to run it the way that I want to. If you don't like it, you don't have to be part of the organization. And so like that those distinctions are tricky because when somebody says, I was part of this organization thinking that you were going to stand for these principles and you've said these principles. Well, the principles and the values of an organization it's a spotlight or a light beam to try to get to. Not every, we're not going to be able to live up to all of the values that we truly, that we want, but it's the place that we're trying to get to. That's the growth edge. But I think like people get betrayed. They they have, when you lean into a movement and you find your people and you believe that they are of the same values or the same principles or the same things that you do, and then they disappoint you, it's a betrayal. It can be devastating for people because when they, especially if it's a leader, right? If it's a leader that has disappointed you or harmed you and you lose and you don't feel like you can be part of that group anymore, you lose your entire group. It's not just one person. And so yeah, it's like there are some real, perils that can happen in there. And so I go back to the power and love thing, right? And so when I just really think like when Bonobo went through a couple years ago, we went through some really hard social moment where people were wanting us to show up in really specific ways in their belief systems, and we were a no. And I mean, we were a no for parts of it, but they couldn't hear, and it was just a battle back and forth, and it really harmed the membership of our space because a lot of people were just like, okay, well, I'm just not even going to, like, I'm not going to engage in our social, in the social space, in the online social space anymore because a few members were making it so hostile to be in there. And it's not why people were coming. And so we were saying, like, this is not a space to be discussing these particular topics, even though they're important to you. And there are lots of different places to discuss these topics if you want to, but this is like, it's non-consensual at this point. So anyway, we had a hard time navigating it because um it was very volatile. Yeah, I think in the end I don't have any answers except that it can be very tricky. I think the lesson I learned was don't let a small group of people overtake your space. If they need to get kicked out, then they might need, like you may need to like hold a line because I wish it that piece affected so many people, so many like active members that wanted to be part of it. And there were like 10 people that were like being very loud and disruptive. So, and I think probably 200 to 300 people that left because of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a big deal and it was a big lesson. And I think as leaders, we were too loving instead of bringing back our boundaries and our power in the space. So, I mean, and I think we couldn't have known. It was a judgment call, and like we were trying to be loving, but making those hard calls as the leader and as a person who's holding the boundaries for the group. So, what's the best thing for the group? Versus what's the best thing for certain small number of people or, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, well, that's a lot to say. Unfortunately, the scenarios of the last two organizations that I worked with were playing in not right relationship from what I see. And it's a big reason why I started Movement Maker, because I realized it was interesting. I was going through my entheogenic minister training. And if you're in any well established psychedelic guide training, there's going to be mentorship and supervision that's a part of that, right? I mean, therapists have to go through that, right? And I realized, I'm like, wow, there actually isn't anything like this for movement makers or leaders. Where are the leaders' supervision and mentorship?
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
so missing. And how amazing would that have been if you had had a community where you could go and people could learn from Misha? Because, hello, she went through that, right? And the new activists and the new change makers can come to you and be like, well, shit, what did you do in that situation?
And they do. Yeah, so like I do have a mediation business called Clearing
Mhm.
Conversations and
Sweet.
clearingconversations.com. And so I do get hired as a consultant to larger organizations that are going through things like this. And I do hold space for meetings and talks and policy making and things like that. Sorry,
Hmm.
keep going.
No, good. I'm glad that you plug that because there needs to be more people with those skills. And you're also, are you trained in nonviolent communication too? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I'm interested in how you bring that into the work. I want to take a moment to invite you into something special called Alchemy, a 3-month one on one coaching journey for people who feel called to step into deeper servant leadership. In Alchemy, we weave together the insights of the Enneagram with the sacred container of plant medicine ceremonies so you can understand your patterns, release what no longer serves you, and rise as the leader that you're meant to be. If you've been feeling the pull to step into your gifts and serve from a place of clarity and integrity, I'd love to walk with you. You can learn more and apply at globalmovementmaker.com/alchemy.
Yeah. I mean, nonviolent communication is the basis of my framework for how I see the world more than the framework for how I speak. Although I probably could, I've been connecting with someone who's like a nonviolent communication, like nuanced person, and like they were able to tell me a few things of like how I was thinking about things. But the main thing about NVC, and I know some people have experiences with NVC, and I believe that people early on when they learn it can really misunderstand and misuse some of the tools. And so I guess I'm just saying, if you're a person who has had either harm caused to you because of somebody trying to use NVC with you and they were actually not doing very well, or yeah, or you just had a bad experience. Like, the thing I want to say is that the fundamentals of nonviolent communication is connection. If you're not connecting with the other person, you're not doing nonviolent communication well. And it doesn't matter if you're using the tools or the things like in the formulaic way that Marshall Rosenberg taught it. And the and really what it's about is getting out of your mindset of blaming and shaming other people and judging. And so how do we start to really think about and own what's going, like what just happened from a very camera eye view? How did that have me react through like my emotional body? What needs did it meet or did it not meet for me? And that's very specific, like what are fundamental needs that we all have, not there. And so there are ways to distort these things all throughout. And that's usually what happens when nonviolent communication is misused. And then from all of that information, you get to the strategy of how to like help. So you're actually getting first to the root of why it happened, and then you're going to strategy instead of the other way around, which is often we're trying to like give advice or like just say things like off of what our experience without actually understanding the other's experience. Or I mean, self-empathy is a thing too. Like when I first started realizing, one, that emotions had names and I couldn't start naming them properly, and two, that those emotions had met or unmet needs underneath of them, and that I could then ask for those to get met. Like, it is such an empowering way of thinking. And I feel sad when people when it's been when it can so easily get shifted. The language can get manipulated in ways that are low grade violent. And
Mhm.
that's when people are like, yeah, I don't like that thing. And yeah, of course you don't, because someone's like saying things to you that are actually low grade violent, and you're like,
Mhm.
and telling you that it's not. And so, like, of course, I would hate that too.
If the world could learn nonviolent communication, I think we could probably save humanity, right?
Yeah, yeah. And there's a book called Difficult Conversations or Crucial Conversations that I would highly recommend if you don't like nonviolent communication. Crucial Conversations has a similar framework, but it's different languaging, and it's also an excellent book. More
Awesome.
businessy. Crucial Conversations is like a little more businessy.
Cool. I'm loving all the resources that you're throwing down. Thank you. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm a virtual resource. I have
Library.
a
Yeah.
library, inner library.
I love it. I wanted to ask one or two more questions as we're wrapping up. So I'm going to weave us in another direction. You host these amazing experiences and these amazing events, and events are part of movement making. And again, tying it back to belonging. And I have my own ideas about what's the formula to create an amazing event, but I'd love to hear your ideas around that.
Yeah, you know, oftentimes movements are hard work
Yes, they
because
are.
we're making changes. To me, the key has been, how do you pitch it so that it is fun, or it seems fun,
Mhm.
and then in order to be in the fun, the movement, the learning, the undoing piece comes along with it. So, SoulPlay is a festival. It's an amazing festival and the prize at the end is this, like, the most sweet connection and like a group field of like connection and welcoming and heart and vulnerability and softness and tenderness, and people just like feeling and being together in this way that you don't often get to feel with a large group of people. But how we get there is an experience of, there are lots of different experiences. Some are fun, some are a little bit, edgy, some are like everything from, there's a session on feedback, like how to get feedback, or there's like meetups for different types of people. There's a sensual, like, neo tantra workshop where you're paired with different people, maybe for the first time, doing like kind of sensual, touchy things. There's partner dancing. There's the art of almost kissing. But then there's also these other things, like at the pool is optional nude, like you can be optionally like naked and for some people that might be the first time that they're in a public space in a pool setting, seeing people, naked. And it's an amazing experience because we don't often see normal humans, everyday humans, just walking around naked, enjoying the sun and soaking it up, and it also being a consensual experience. It's not weird. It's not like there's lots of sexy energy happening or anything like that. It's just us being us, like in our full expressions and on our floaties and being silly and dancing, and it's wonderful. With Bonobo is similar, is like, okay, you get to come to these parties where you might get to meet a romantic connection, but you need to learn all these things ahead of time in order to be up to speed on our culture, our etiquette, on how to be consensual, on like what are the agreements in the space? How are you going to dress? Like what, all these things. So with both Soul Play and Bonobo, there's a bunch of orientation that happens, and that's, I think, one of the keys is prefronting or front front loading the education piece to like bring everyone up to the level of the movement that you're wanting to create.
Yeah, I think that's really, really astute because it creates the expectations, it creates the safety, and they know what they're stepping into. Yeah. I wanted to also mention that at least SoulPlay I know is without substances, right? Is Bonobo like that as well, or are they both
Yeah, no,
free?
Bonobo's more of a party, like a general party atmosphere. There's no rules around it. They don't serve any alcohol. They don't,
Mhm.
there's no serving of anything, but like, yeah, there's no rules against people doing whatever they do. At
Mhm.
Soul Play, it's a sober environment. It's a sober
Mhm.
festival. And what's interesting about that is because we're asking people to like push their edges in different ways, we're wanting them to be sober because we don't want it to be a fleeting experience. We want
Mhm.
it to be fully integrated, and, substances help with social lube, right? It's a social lubricant, and there are lots and lots of places where that social lubricant works. And part of the experiment of soul play is to say, what would it be like if you spent a weekend really, being invited into a social, connected, heart-centered, vulnerable space, and there were no substances. And yeah, it's a fun, I think it for people who are often in the like party scene that use a lot of substances, it's a fun invitation for them to take a break and see what they're like without it. And for sober people, it's just a wonderful space, safer space for them to like be able to party again when normally it's very edgy for them to go into a festival setting and be potentially triggered into a reuse.
Speaking of movements, it's interesting because I think there is a bit of a, if rebellion is the right word, but like a rebellion around substances and drinking. You're seeing a lot of younger culture now deciding not to drink. And I think that Soul Play is really interesting to see a festival where that's not encouraged there. If I can name one throughput of all of these different interviews that I'm doing, is a lot around embodied wisdom, getting back into your body. And I think that so many of us have been disconnected from our body. And so to have a whole weekend where it's like, wait a minute, let me actually be sober and feel into my nervous system about how I feel about different connections that I'm making and really be true on my edge instead of pushing down those protectors and going past my limits of what I would do generally. So just want to give you a nod on that one. Is there anything else that you'd love to share with my audience? You've been incredible, Misha. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, we had just launched a new monthly event called The Sway,
Mhm.
and that is Soul Play's monthly gathering of humans to support like nourishment and nervous system regulation. It's a little bit of a movement meditation. It's a snuggle tea space, and we even have childcare for people who need some childcare. Children from 5 to 11 is we're providing space for. So all the hot mamas, I hope, can come and dance their booties off and bring their kids. It's been amazing. We're having our second one in October. And if you just sign up on soulplay.co, with no in on the end, you can sign up on our new newsletter and you'll get all the information.
Amazing. And that's going to be in Berkeley, right?
That the sway is in Oakland.
Okay, awesome. And then what about your other personal work and Bonobo? Like where can everyone get a hold of you? Sorry if I just pronounced that miscorrect.
Bobo.
Bonobo, thank you.
Bonobo. Yeah. So Bonobo can be found at bonobonetwork.com. They are a membership. There are some things that you can dip your toe in if you're not a member, but most events are behind the membership paywall. There's lots on the website, so it's a great resource. And then I also do mediation work and consulting for movement makers and conflict resolution, complicated dynamics. A lot of what we're doing is There's business and social spheres that are intermixed, and having to navigate those different hats can be really difficult. I consult on that type of work. Yeah, so that's clearingconversations.com. And then my dating website is just at mishabonaventura.com. And that is my rebel lover work for all
Rebel lover work. Well, we're going to have another podcast where I learn more about that. That sounds exciting.
I have so many movements going. It's ridiculous.
Well, no wonder I felt a kinship with you immediately. Incredible. Well, thank you so much, Misha. It was incredible to chat with you and to mine some of your wisdom. You've done incredible work, and look forward to coming to SoulPlay this year.
Yay!
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Call to Rise. If today's conversation stirred something in you, subscribe and share it with a fellow movement maker. And join our community at globalmovementmaker.com. Till next time, keep leading with courage, keep weaving ancient wisdom with modern strategy, and always remember to answer the call.